Okay, so hi everyone, and thanks for coming today. We're just gonna start outside and then go in, but these are just some decorations that we did, not too much. And here's a column from made from chalk, but yeah, that's about it. We'll go inside.
Hello, everyone.
Okay, hi, okay, so this is the display. Okay, and I'll go to the main steps. But before we get started, like I just want to say a few words. So usually if there's any sort of like death in our families, we don't really do this kind of celebration. And earlier this year, we lost our aunt, Shobana Mami, and her mother. Um, but I felt compelled to continue the tradition this year because Shobana Mami actually helped me get my first set of Golu Bomme, or the statues. And that was really what helped make my dream of making something on this scale become a reality. And so I kind of wanted to, show my respect and, my memory of her doing that for me and kind of continuing this tradition. So I just wanted to start out by saying that and sort of acknowledging her and her mother and everything that they've done for our family. And yeah, I'll go ahead and get started. So here is the main set of steps. This year I didn't get any new dolls. Unfortunately, I forgot and it was too late before I could get something new. So pretty much the same sets that I've had in the past. Um, but for anybody who's unfamiliar with Kolu, I can just explain a few of the sets that are pretty common amongst most people's houses pretty briefly. So down here, if you can see, also, sorry, before I start, I'll just mention if everybody can make sure to mute. And then if you have any questions along the way, you can put them in the chat, or if there's any technical problems, you can put in the chat, and then at the end we can talk about the questions and all that stuff. And also, if you have your traditional clothes on, make sure to turn your cameras on. But so I'll start again, sorry. So these dolls in the middle here, like grandpa and grandma, they're like old and they're kind of big. And so they kind of represent like wealth and prosperity. You can see the little market that they have here with all these different kinds of grains and like rice or lentils. And so those things are sort of representing wealth and like prosperity and inviting that abundance into our homes. And then the next step up, we have this set of 8 different goddesses. They're called Ashtalakshmi. So Ashta means 8, and Lakshmi is the goddess of wealth. So there are 8 different forms of wealth. And this is another set that's pretty common. Most people will have it on their kolu. And then the next set that I wanted to talk about is Dasavadaram. So it's this step here up to this 5th doll. And then over here, it continues these 5 dolls. And so Dasa Avadara means 10 avatars, and it's the 10 avatars of Lord Vishnu. And they kind of talk about how life on Earth has evolved from like different animals into humans. And then as we grew into civilization, how our spiritual thinking was also evolving. So that's another very common set. And then the last set that I wanted to talk about is, it might be a little hard to see, but starting with this doll here, this one, and then the third one. So those are Durga, Lakshmi, and Saraswati. And so they're sort of the 3 most important deities that we worship during this festival, and they represent wealth and strength and knowledge. And so this is also a very popular, like set to have on your Kolu steps. But this is like the pretty basic part of any Golu is to have these steps. And it's, again, like the central point, as you can see. But then what you do around that is kind of up to you. And so this year, and each year I try to do a theme. So this year, my theme was the origins of Hinduism. So where did it start and sort of who were the people responsible for that? And so I'll go through and sort of explain the research that I've done and how I've tried to make it into like an artistic expression of that. And so the thing that I want to start out by saying is this half of the display is going to be talking about the Indus River Valley civilization. And then this half is going to be talking about the Indo-Aryans. So I'll go ahead and get started. Okay, so these are just some posters that I made. There's a lot of information, and I'm obviously not going to go over all of it because that would be really time consuming. But one of the things that is the problem when studying the Indus civilization is that their writing hasn't been translated yet. And so there's not like a Rosetta Stone or anything that helps you translate it through different languages. So all we have are these symbols. That are sort of hard to decipher. And so you have to attach a meaning to them. So one of the popular theories is that the Indus people spoke a Dravidian language. So for anyone who's not familiar, the Dravidian language family is now mostly spoken in southern India and Sri Lanka. And so the most popular theory is that the Indus people spoke a language like that. And so I'll start, and I'm only going to go over this one row of this table because there's like so much information and it would be really overwhelming to do all of it right now. But one of the common recurring symbols in the Indus tablets are fish. And so like obviously people thought, hey, it's a fish, so they probably are writing about fish. But a lot of people have sort of come up with new ideas for what that could mean. And so something that's common across a lot of ancient civilizations is using stars or planets when they're talking about their names and writing about them. And so a popular theory is that this fish, instead of just literally meaning, so like the literal meaning is a fish, right? And in Proto-Dravidian, so that's kind of like when you reconstruct all the Dravidian languages we have now, kind of the common roots for some of the words. So the way to say fish is mean. And then Old Tamil, so Tamil is, again, it's a Dravidian language. And so we can look at that as sort of a link between these Indus symbols and modern languages. And so a way to say star in Old Tamil is also mean. So you can see that they're the same word. And then, so we're trying to move kind of through history, right? So the modern names for stars are in Tamil, it's Natchatram, but you can also say Vinmeen. And so you can see that the mean part is still in there. And then when we look at like qualities about in Hindu texts about stars, they're often likened to fish, like the glittering or shimmering scales of fish. Is how they sort of are described. And so like what I'm trying to show through this table is sort of like starting from the Indus civilization, which I should have mentioned this before, but they are from around 3,300 BCE to like 1,900 BCE. So starting from that civilization, I'm trying to show a progression into like modern day Hinduism and showing like there's a continuity between them. And so it might be a reasonable assumption that the Indus people did speak a Dravidian language and parts of their religion are still part of Hindu religion. And so I made this whole table and then, you know, like all these other different like drawings that sort of show that more evidence for that theory. But again, I'll be posting all of this, you know, on Facebook, and I can send out pictures and detailed descriptions for people who are interested. But for the sake of time, I'm not going to go very in depth for the rest of these. So we'll move on to the other parts. And then this is a peacock that I made from like 2014 or something. So you're always trying to reuse things from past years. And then like that, This arch here I made in 2017, so just repurposing stuff. Okay, so I mentioned that like this whole half of the display is going to be talking about the Indus civilization and what from that group of people we can see being continued in modern day Hinduism. So each of these tables, like on this side and then on the other side, I started with a scene that is pretty typical of like Hinduism that we think about today in the middle. And then I've sort of shown derivations for where things like in that scene have come from through history. So the scene in the middle is a banyan tree. And in front of it, we have these idols. So the idol here is Goddess Durga, and she's standing on a buffalo head because the popular story is that she's the goddess who defeated Mahisha, who is the buffalo demon. And then we have these like sort of snake deities on either side. And so a common scene, especially in villages, is that you'll see shrines sort of attached to trees or other natural spaces, and they incorporate mainly the goddess as well as like natural, like different sorts of deities that have to do with nature. And so this is the scene that I wanted to start with. And so the first half of this table is going to talk about the mother goddess and her relationship to the buffalo. And then the second half is going to talk about the banyan tree and some of the other like cosmological concepts that may have been derived from the Indus civilization. So I'm going to start here. So this scene, so this is a statue that I made out of clay. This is like some grass and stuff made out of cardstock. And then this background is made from oil pastel. And so there's a popular sort of theory about a fertility cult that was sort of spread throughout Europe and West Asia into South Asia. And some elements of that culture or that sort of belief system was a mother goddess. So that's what we have here, associated with lions or tigers, any kind of big cat. And she represented the daytime and especially the earth. And then you have a god, like a sky god, who was represented by a male buffalo or just a bull of any kind. And he was consistent, like he represented the sky and then also the nighttime. So that's sort of what I've tried to show here. And you can see elements of that belief system, which included, so an annual rite was the marriage between the goddess and the sky god. And that ended with the goddess killing the sky god. And so that sort of shows the transition from like the period of rains that brings a lot of food to the periods of drought where people wouldn't have as much food, because the whole idea is that the god who's representing the sky, the rain is what fertilizes the earth. And so that like divine marriage ending with the goddess killing the god is something that you see throughout, as I mentioned, different West Asian and South Asian cultures. So here I've drawn out some images from different civilizations, sort of like the tablets and inscriptions that they've had that sort of deal with this. So one that I want to show in detail, this is from, in West Asia, so like Iraq, Iran, those kinds of places. You can see there are these seals that have like bulls and lions sort of fighting with each other. So the lions are using arrows and the bulls have clubs. And it's kind of showing, not they're working in balance, sort of. They're working against each other, but it's sort of like equaled out. And you can see that again here in this similar sort of seal. But you can see like this, the use of sacrificing bulls and like that relationship between the goddess and the sky god sort of mirrored here. And you can see that these are Indus seals. So again, Indus civilization, we're talking about that, where they have these like bull contests of people wrestling with bulls. You see that again here. Here's a man, like sacrificing a bull. And so those like ideas may have come from, this cult of the goddess and the sky god. And then, here again, you see like a goddess who is a warrior, and her, her body is of a tiger. So like that relationship between the goddess and like lions and tigers, that sort of thing. So from there, when you get into like the Vedic period, so after the Indus civilization started to decline, is when the Vedic period in India began. So in this scene, I've shown a, um, a festival called Mahavrata, which is a Vedic festival that they held during the equinoxes. And part of that was the horse sacrifice. And so a popular theory is that the Aryans, they did use a lot of like sacrifice of animals and stuff. So when they came to like India, and they saw that the Indus people were using buffaloes to sacrifice, they just replaced that with horses, because that was something that was more familiar with them. But in the sacrifice that the horse is sacrificed, the Vedic queen sits next to the horse, and she's called Mahishi, which means female buffalo. So you can kind of see that there is, even though they've replaced the animal that's being sacrificed, they're still carrying this relationship of like the buffalo and the goddess. And so that's just kind of the scene that I have shown here. And like there's, like a little fire, there's like the priest, and this is the king. And then something that's common in a lot of like Vedic sacrifices, and even in Hinduism today, is I'm trying to show. Okay, this is like a kumbham. So like I made this out of a chess piece, and there's like the coconut is made out of clay, and then like the leaves are made out of paper. So that was one part of that. And then coming into like modern day Hinduism, so I've kind of shown you from like this sort of like proto fertility cult into Indus River Valley civilization to Vedic times. Now we get into modern day Hinduism, where this scene is depicting a festival called Navarathri, which is the one that we're celebrating right now. And so this festival is about the triumph of goddess Durga over the demon Mahishasura. So you can see that continuity, sort of, this goddess who's associated with the tiger and the lion, killing a buffalo, and sort of she is known for fertility and strength, that kind of thing. And this festival is, celebrating that and different aspects of the goddess. And so I made these like little books because that's an important part of the festival for us. And then these little oil lamps are also made out of chess pieces. But that was one. And then the other scene that I wanted to show quickly is this is a cave painting, or a cave sculpture, sorry, from Mahabalipuram, which is in India. And you can sort of see a very similar scene from this tablet, where the lion's using a bow and arrow and the bull is using a club. And so you can see that pretty mirrored here. And so that might indicate that there's some continuity between the Indus civilization and a modern day Hinduism. So that is that side of the table. Okay, so the next part of the table, we're going to talk about some like astrology, astronomy, like cosmology, sort of like stuff related to space, basically, that we have in modern day Hinduism that may have come from the Indus people. And so I wanted to start with the banyan tree. So in this Indus symbol that comes up a lot, there's a fish, and what some people associate with like a banyan tree or like a fig tree or something. And so the Proto-Dravidian word for rope is vata. And so that refers to the ropes that hang from like the banyan tree, like the roots that are hanging down from it. But the word vata can also be the root for the word north. And I mentioned before that the fish is like associated with the star. So this symbol, it looks like a fish in a tree, but it may be trying to convey that it's the North Star. So like that's maybe what they were talking about. And so you see this relationship between the banyan tree and the North Star, right? And then in later Vedic texts, there's a concept about the heavenly banyan tree, that sort of the ropes of the banyan tree supply energy, or they connect different like people, different gods, different planets and stars. Like they sort of connect it all together. And the biggest thing that's holding it all together at the top is the North Star. And so again, you see like North Star, banyan tree, it's like all kind of connected. Because the North Star is known as Dhruva Nakshatram, which it means it's fixed, it's immovable. And so it's at the center, and around it is where everything is connected, sort of. So that's what I've shown here. So these I made in like 2017 or something, but I just put like little ropes connecting their heads to the tree. So it's sort of showing that concept of like how things are connected and energy is supplied to them. And then another interesting thing is that the sun is sort of seen as the daytime counterpart of the pole star. And so in a similar way, the rays of the sun are thought to be supplying energy to like the planets or even to people in Vedic texts. And so here I've shown, like I painted these little like planets of the sun. And then from the Indus text, we see that different names could have been given to different planets that describe them by their colors. So Mercury is associated with green, Venus is associated with white, Mars is associated with red, Jupiter is associated with gold or yellow, and then Saturn is associated with black. And so that's something that we still see today in Hinduism. If you go to the temple and you see the Navagraham, they're all wearing different colors. And so those are the same colors that I'm talking about here. So again, that's another thing that, you know, we may have gotten from the Indus people, which is pretty cool. So then building off of this relationship about like the sun providing energy through these rays, I come to this part, that this is a diagram. So this is some sort of a diagram that's common along in yoga or in Ayurveda. So those are, again, like other like derived from Vedic texts, but basically it's showing that within a person, you have all these energy channels called nadis, and then they're sort of connected to Kundalini, which is like your root in your root. It's like a latent source of energy. And then like the crown, it's also connected to the crown where you can get energy from like the universe. So it's again sort of mirroring with the colors and the different energy channels. It sort of mirrors this relationship of like the sun and the pole star providing energy for people. So I've drawn that here, and then I've shown also this is Patanjali, who he's believed to be the composer of Yoga Sutra, or like the text on yoga. So that is this side of the display. So now I'll move to the next part. Okay, so I mentioned earlier that this part I'll be talking about the Indo-Aryans. So after the Indus civilization started to decline, this group of people moved in called, how we now call them, the Indo-Aryans. And they brought with them what would later become the Vedic religion and the Vedic texts, which, like, as a lot of you will know, it's now a foundation for Hinduism. So again, I'll start in the middle here with the scene that's pretty common in modern day Hinduism, and then I'll show how those elements are derived from this group of people. So here is like a temple tower or gopuram. So I made this out of just like cardboard and paper. So there's just like little motifs that resemble what they look like in real life. So then you can see the different angles. And then here you see two priests. They're performing a fire sacrifice. And in Tamil, we call that like homam or yagam. They commonly do this more so in the temples than like in homes. But you can see them, you know, like pouring ghee into the fire. And so that is like a central part in the Vedic religion, is this fire sacrifice. So I will start here with this scene. So here's a scene. This is sort of depicting like the Proto-Indo-Europeans. So like very long time ago, like no one knows a whole lot about them or what they looked like and stuff. So I just kind of made random pictures. But it's believed that they come from Eurasia, so like near Eastern Europe and like Russia, those kinds of places. They have these grasslands, so there's like a lot of grass here, and they're pastoralists, so they raise animals like goats and cows. And then the biggest thing also to take away is that they were nomadic, and they relied a lot on horses, which were native to the areas that they lived in. So you can see this man, he's riding a horse. So that is very important later on um, when I talk about the Vedic religion. But so it's thought that because they had the horse and then they had chariots to attach, they were able to spread very quickly throughout West Asia, into Central Asia, and then eventually down into South Asia, or like in India and Pakistan. They also went into Europe. So that's why you see this relationship between like Greek and like Latin languages to Sanskrit, because they sort of had a long time ago like the same root, a Proto-Indo-European root. So I'll get into more specifics. It's commonly believed that there were two big waves of Indo-Aryans that migrated into India. So the first wave, they spent a lot of time in Central Asia, sort of near like Kazakhstan and stuff. There was already a civilization there that they sort of spent a lot of time with. So they picked up a lot of their religious beliefs as well. So I'll start first with here. This is Varuna. So he's a Vedic god that's associated with the oceans. He's riding on Makara, which is like this crazy like sea monster thing, but like now it's sort of just become a crocodile. But he's also associated with like justice and truth. And so that was something that was common in like, if you look at Zoroastrianism, they have like these different gods that represent different social values. And so that's something that the Aryans in this wave of migrants might have picked up from that civilization, because they placed a lot of importance on deities like Varuna, Mitra, people like that. And then also the Adityas, or the solar deities, which here I've sort of simplified. There's like 12 of them or something, but I've just shown one, which is the most common one that we still think about today, is Surya, or like the main sun god now. But here he is like on his chariot, like riding this horse that has 7 heads. But having these different deities that they represent natural phenomena, but then they also represent social values. That was something that was common with these like Central and West Asian cultures that this group of migrants may have spent a lot of time with. And then again, the horses, like super important. So here are the Ashwins, and they're like a set of twins, and sometimes they're depicted with horse heads, sometimes they're depicting riding horses or like in a chariot. And so I mentioned how like the horse and the chariot were very important to the Indo-Europeans and like later to the Indo-Aryans. So the Ashwins enjoyed like a high status amongst this wave of migrants. So then I'll get into the second wave of migrants, and they are the ones that came in. So the first wave came in around, I think like 1900 BCE. I'm not 100% sure, I'm sorry. And then the second wave came in a little bit after that. But they spent less time in Central Asia because the civilizations there started to decline as well. So they brought with them more like closer to some of the other like Proto-Indo-European cultures, like this importance of a sky god. And so here I've shown Indra. So Indra is like the most important deity for the second group of for migrants. And he's like the god of the sky, like the god of like thunder, lightning, that kind of stuff. And he was like a huge hero in a lot of the text that the second wave of migrants wrote. And so here he is riding his elephant, and he has like lightning bolt and like his weapons. The second deity that was very important for them was Agni. And so Agni is the fire god of fire. And so through Agni is how you made sacrifices to the other gods. And so he was hugely important in the this group of Indo-Aryans, and he's mentioned a lot in their text as well. And so here you can see him riding a ram, and he's usually depicted having like 2 faces and like fire behind him, because he's the god of fire. And then the last god that I want to mention, okay, the last god that I want to mention is Soma. So he is now commonly associated with Chandra, the moon god, but in the Vedas, Soma is also known as this drink that's made from a plant, which we don't really know what plant it is now, but it was supposed to be hallucinogenic, and it gave the people who drank it like powers and stuff. So the priests would drink it, and then in the texts you have that the gods drank it as well. So these are like the three most important deities for that group. And so this wave of migrants was actually the ones that wrote the first of the Vedas, or the Rig Veda. So that's what I've shown here, is a piece from the Rig Veda. It's actually the first verse of the first book. So this one is dedicated to Agni, I believe. So again, it's like he's very important. And then here I've continued that set of verses onto this little piece. But then after the Vedas, the core texts were written, the next thing that sort of came was talking more about like philosophy and spirituality. And so in Hinduism today, a lot of our beliefs on spirituality about like God and, you know, the soul, life and death, that comes from the Vedas, but it comes from the later part of the Vedas, which is known as the Upanishads. And Upanishads. And those are also known as Vedanta, or the end of the Veda. And so they talk mostly about spirituality and like our place in the universe, like that sort of thing. And so it's commonly believed that this sage Vyasa is the one who sort of wrote a lot of the Upanishads. And so here I've shown him in the forest, and he's sort of instructing other people on writing these texts. Like there's like little baby deer and stuff. And then you see here's another Rishi, and he's writing an Upanishad. And then here is Ganesha, and here he's using his tusk to write the Mahabharatam, because it's commonly believed that Vyasa also composed some of the epics that came later in Hinduism. And so that's sort of what I have here on this side. And then the last thing I want to show you, everyone, is talking more about the Vedas. So I briefly mentioned about the Rig Veda being the first of the Vedas, and like I'm not going to go into super detail because there's also, again, a lot of text here, but I'll just give a like very brief overview. So the Rig Veda, as I mentioned, is like the first in the set of 4 Vedas, and it's known as the knowledge of verses. So it's mostly comprised of like verses that sort of exalt, talk about different gods. And then the Sama Veda is known as the knowledge of melodies. So, Veda means like knowledge. It comes from the root vid, which means to know. And so all of these are talking about like different kinds of knowledge. So Sama Veda is the knowledge of melodies and songs. So it's basically stuff from the Rig Veda that's been set to like music. And then the Yajur Veda is the knowledge of rituals or worship. So it talks about, different types of like formulas for offerings or mantras, things like that are involved in like religious services. And then the last one is called Atharva Veda, and that's the knowledge of procedures for everyday life. And so that's where you have stuff like marriage and funeral ceremonies. Like they also have like spells and stuff in there to like ward away evil. So just a very big variety. And then the last thing, so within each of the 4 Vedas, you have 4 different parts. So the core text is known as Samhita, and that's where you find all the prayers and stuff. The next set of layers is the Brahmanas, which talk about, they kind of are commentaries. They tell you how to use the rituals use the prayers in rituals. The third layer is called Aranyaka, which talks about some of the philosophy behind the rituals. And then the last, as I mentioned before, Upanishad talks mostly about like the spirituality and philosophical implications of these texts. So that's basically it. On this table, it's literally just like decorations, nothing major. But yeah, that's pretty much it for everything. Yes, one thing before I leave. So here we have like all these different offerings that we keep. So here's the kumbam, as I mentioned before. This is supposed to invoke like the divine presence in our home during these kinds of ceremonies. And then we have like food offerings and books as well. As I mentioned, that my goddess Saraswati is important for this, and so like knowledge and learning is heavily emphasized. So that's a okay. So that's it. So thanks everyone again for taking the time to come out today. Let me know if you have any questions. I'll just quickly go upstairs and show you like an aerial view because you can see everything and it looks nice. So here it is. But yeah, thanks everyone for coming, and let me know. I will go downstairs and let me know if you have like questions and stuff.
She wants to know if you wrote those Sanskrit letters.
Oh yeah, so I did write one here for the Rig Veda verses and stuff. I actually, funnily, I made this morning. So I made these. I was running out of time, so I made them this morning. But yeah, I wrote those ones.